Remember when gaming on Linux was a joke? Install some obscure distro, compile wine from source, pray your game even launches, and still get half the frame rate of Windows? Yeah, that's done. Linux just hit an all-time high of 3.2% market share on Steam, and it's accelerating fast. We're talking 90% of Windows games now running on Linux. Some are even running faster than on Windows. Valve didn't just make Linux gaming possible, they made it competitive. Let me show you how. Alright, so this is what changed, the major update of Proton 10. For those who don't know, Proton is Valve's compatibility layer that lets you run Windows games on Linux. It's based on Wine, but heavily modified with cutting-edge translation tech. And Proton 10, which just dropped in November 2025, is a monster update. We're talking about based on Wine 10 with over 6,000 individual improvements. Updated DXVK and VKD3D Proton for better DirectX translation. Fixes for literally hundreds of games. Games that are now playable include Delta Force, Dragon Age, The Veilguard, Immortals, Phoenix Rising, even Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. And that's just scratching the surface. But here's where it gets insane. ProtonDB, that's the community database tracking game compatibility, shows that nearly 90% of Windows games now work on Linux. 90%. It took 8 years to go from 1% to 2% Linux market share on Steam, then just over 2 years to hit 3%. Now, we're at 3.2% and climbing every single month. And get this, in some games, Linux is actually faster than Windows. Now I know what you're thinking, but it's a translation layer, there's overhead, it has to be slower. And yeah, historically you'd lose about 10 to 15% performance. But something weird is happening. Recent benchmarks show Linux beating Windows in multiple games. Cyberpunk 2077, 20% faster on Linux with Proton. Batman Arkham Knight, faster overall with better frame times. Even when Linux is slightly slower, like 3 to 5%, the frame times are often more consistent, which means smoother gameplay. Why? A few reasons. First, Linux has way less bloat. No Cortana, no forced updates in the background, no telemetry eating your resources. The OS just stays out of your way. Second, AMD's open source drivers on Linux are really good. In some cases, better than Windows. NVIDIA's catching up too with their new open source kernel drivers. And third, Valve is directly optimizing Proton for the games people actually play. Every Steam Deck optimization flows back to desktop Linux. Speaking of the Steam Deck, this thing changed everything. Valve has sold around 4 million Steam Decks since 2022. And here's the crazy part, it runs Arch Linux. Every single one. So suddenly you've got millions of people gaming on Linux who don't even realize it. They're just playing their Steam library on the go, and it works. This forced rapid improvements to Proton. Game developers started testing their titles on the deck. Anti-cheat providers started enabling Linux support. Well, some of them. And other handheld manufacturers took notice. The ROG Ally, Legion Go, they all run Windows by default, and users hate it. Battery life sucks, the interface is clunky, updates break things. Meanwhile, there's Bassite, a SteamOS-like distribution you can install on any handheld. It gives you about 90% of the Steam Deck experience with better hardware. People are literally buying $700 Windows handhelds and immediately replacing Windows with Linux. The Steam Deck proved Linux can deliver a console-like experience. Smooth, stable, and it works. Now, Linux gaming isn't perfect. There's one massive problem: anti-cheat. Games like Fortnite, Valorant, Destiny 2, they don't work on Linux. Not because they can't, but because the developers won't enable it. Both Easy Anti-Cheat and BattleEye support Linux. Epic and BattleEye literally built the support, but individual game developers have to flip a switch to enable it. Some do. Apex Legends used to work on Linux, then EA disabled it, citing cheating concerns. Same with GTA Online. Rockstar added BattleEye, but didn't enable Linux support. And here's the frustrating part. Windows has way more cheaters than Linux. Research papers prove it. But Linux gets blamed because it's open source and harder to secure. It's a circular problem. Developers say not enough Linux players to justify support. But Linux players can't grow if they can't play popular competitive games. That said, things are improving. More games are enabling support. The Steam Deck's popularity is forcing publishers to pay attention. But if you're a hardcore Valorant or Fortnite player, Linux probably isn't for you. Yet. So why should you care about any of this? Because gaming on Linux represents something bigger: freedom from Microsoft's ecosystem. You're not dealing with forced Windows 11 upgrades, TPM2 requirements, constant telemetry, online-only accounts, or updates that break your PC. Distributions like Linux Mint, Pop! DOScore OS, and Nobara are genuinely easy to use. You can game, browse, work everything you do on Windows without the corporate surveillance. And here's the timeline. Windows 10 support ended in October 2025. That's 240 million computers facing a choice: upgrade to Windows 11, buy a new PC, or try something different. Linux is now that something different for gamers. Not just for nerds and terminals, but for actual mainstream users who just want their games to work. Valve gave Linux gaming credibility. The Steam Deck gave it visibility. and Proton gave it compatibility. The year of the Linux desktop? Maybe not. But the year of Linux gaming? We might already be there. What do you think? Have you tried gaming on Linux? Are you considering making the switch, or are you sticking with Windows? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to see how many of you are running Linux, Steam Deck, or considering it. If you found this interesting, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into tech that actually matters. I've got a full guide on switching to Linux coming next week. See you in the next one.